Hey nerds, we are going to do our review and breakdown of Star Wars The Acolyte, Episode 7, starting now. Welcome to the Nerd Social. I am Colin.
And
So
I'm
we are
David.
now at the penultimate episode of Star Wars The Acolyte. And the Episode 7, spoiler-free logline, is that a bitter truth is revealed. So short means that there's a lot of juicy things that's going to happen in this episode. David, what are your thoughts about what we just saw in Episode 7?
I have to say straight out, this is a letdown because this feels like I'm watching a repeat of episode 3. And then earlier, before we did the recording, we talked about how the order of all these episodes are messed up. Because in this episode, you've seen this already, but you see a few details that episode 3 did not cover. So I'd say it's a letdown, but it did put some perspective of a few of the characters. But the thing is, it's not a great way to set up for the final finale next
Right.
week.
I do agree with that because it just takes you away from what has happened in Episode 6 and then going into Episode 7. And I've discussed many times about how Star Wars, the Disney Plus shows have been average to above average. And I think that they really have had a struggle with trying to tell a good story. I think that representation is really good. I think that trying new ideas, trying new things, I'm all for that. But if you don't have a good story or the story feels very disjointed, all the representation in the world is not going to help it in any way, shape, or form. So, just like you said, this was almost a repeat of episode 3 from a certain point of view, to quote Obi-Wan. So I just feel that this could have been reorganized in a very different way, where if you want to do that type of certain point of view, do it back to back. And then you do what happened in episodes 4, 5, and 6. You can probably scrunch that to maybe one episode, 1.5 episodes, depending on the time. Or you could do some type of mid-season 1-hour special. So I think that's my frustration with this particular show, and I think that there really should be some changes to how Disney approaches Star Wars, because just disregard the toxicity of the internet. Just look at it from a very objective point of view of storytelling, is that they really need to make some changes to it, because it's really not that effective. And yes, Andor was pretty effective to a certain degree, but because there was a lot of brilliant acting. Ahsoka was average to above average, great characters, but again, the story is disjointed. And then finally we have Mandalorian Season 3, which was a disappointment compared to the first 2 seasons of The Mandalorian. So they just need to rethink how they're going to approach it. And I hope Disney really thinks about it and not just put out formulaic things like this. So, having said all that, what is your rating for this particular episode of The Acolyte?
I give it a 7 at dinner party because it's something that whoever is watching that show together as a watch party would have discussions during the whole episode and everything, because there'll be a bunch of things that say, okay, so this happened, so this really happened here, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I also went back and forth. I really applaud the newness of it. I really applaud the risks that they were trying to take here. I also would give it a 7, which is a dinner party, because there are some things that I wish that they could have done in terms of reorganization, which would help the show flow a little better, and I would learn to appreciate a little bit more of the show overall from that certain point of view. Any other thoughts before we get to spoiler territory?
Let's
Okay.
dive in.
If you like what we have to say about Star Wars The Acolyte and any of our content, please like, share, subscribe to our channel. It will really help us out. We are growing as a channel, and we appreciate all the support that we have so far. So, spoilers ahead. Okay, this is the first scene of Soul from a different perspective, looking at May and Usha, fighting with each other and saying that they were in the Forbidden Forest, and Coral came to intervene. And this was back in episode 3. We also learned that the reason of why they're on the planet is that they discovered a vergence of some sort of the Force, which was very strange and very unusual. And the vergence actually is the one thing that gives life to this planet, which they did not see. And also, it ties back to episode 3, where Palpatine was saying to Anakin, oh, there's the M count, and the midichlorians are the ones that create life, which is very interesting. Torben here is a person that's very conflicted. We saw a little bit of who he was in the previous episodes as Indara's Padawan, but here he doesn't feel the point of this mission, and he wants to go back to Coruscant as soon as possible. David, what do you think is his headspace on this episode and also in previous episodes?
Like I said, the one thing I give credit to this episode is that it gives more perspective and more details of each of the characters of what happened back then. Because at the beginning, we saw Tobin, silent, deep meditation guy, back in episode 2, and until he killed himself by taking that poison May gave him. And now we get to see the reason why he's being like this. Because he's drowned with guilt. I think he's in the point where he's on the trials before they become Jedi Knights. So I think this is a first trial for him become a Knight. But he's not doing it so well because he's so focused on going back to Coruscant and everything. So that's why I feel like he's very reckless and he's rushing to things to get it done. And now we get back to the scene where the Jedi came to the Coven to meet the witches and discuss about the children, and then to meet the children for the first time. And during that conversation, the witch one possessed Tobin, which is where he felt that he wants to get out of there as soon as possible and wants to find a shortcut to the next mission. And that led to like discussion after being the Jedi, where the Coven, especially the two mothers, discussed about the meeting with the Jedi and discussed what they should do to girls. One mother wants the girls to stay. Another one wants to give both of them the choice. Even though it is revealed later on that the two girls are actually the same person, just split between two persons. So they're not technically twins. It's just basically the same conscious, but two different people. One is the good conscious, and the other is the bad conscious. Like the angel and the devil on your shoulder. That's when we found out why Saul is very invested about those girls, because he's worried what these witches will do to this kind of power of virgins.
So just one more thing before we move on to the next scene is that it's a very good dynamic between these two, where Anna Sarah is the more sympathetic, empathetic mother, whereas Coral is the strict disciplinarian. Both of them loving in their different ways, but at the same time, I think that there's the tough love and then the soft love that comes along with it, and it's a very nice dynamic. But also, Coral is the one that really saying, "Stay away from us, Jedi." But also a nice quote where Sol was saying, "Look, we are here for noble intentions," and Coral was basically shoving it back to his face, like, "Yeah, you are here for noble intentions," which will lead to bad consequences later on, which is very prescient in a lot of ways. And this is also a scene from episode 3 where May lit the fire and Osha escaped, but we saw it from a different perspective. What do you think of this, David, where a different perspective was shown and we thought that May was really evil, but instead it turned out differently?
It turns out that May only wants to burn all the Jedi drawings that Osha was making. That's it. But then what she did not realize, this fire spread very quickly. That is not her intention at all.
Right.
So she did start the fire, but not intentionally. That's the problem.
Exactly. And then we get to a scene where Coral was defending the house. Torben at this point was reckless, and he sped off. Sol then followed him. And then some stuff was about to go down. Sol was saying, "We really need your help, and you better be in the right mindset to face these witches." This was the start of where I think that there was a conflict between both Torben and also Coral. Anna Sarah is trying to keep the peace. Sol is confused. He doesn't know what to do in this point. and then we get to a part where there was some vengeance happening with Anacera, and Soul basically stabs her and kills her, and that leads to the bigger conflict later on. David, I want to hear from you as to who do you think is to blame for all this conflict?
I said it's both sides, especially before Indira informed the council about the twins and wait for instructions whether to accept the twins with them or not. And despite that OSHA did pass, but Indira says you
Right.
coached her, not let her choose. That's the thing. The witches, they're just scared in a way. They don't want anything to ruin their way of life. But a Jedi, they just want to be sure that peace and no one abuse the power of the Force. But it turns out both of them abused it.
Right.
Because they didn't calm that shit down and watch what's going on. But now that he and Soul accidentally stabbed Monteracera, and then Monteracera says, why did you do that? I was planning to let OSHA go to you. And she chose you. And that's when the guilt hit the Soul, saying, what have I done?
Exactly. And this is where part of the guilt came in too when Kelnaka was possessed. This is furthering of the conflict where there was a tit for tat between the two sides, and Kelnaka attacking both Torben and Soul. Luckily, they were both not harmed at this point, and this is the part where Indara had to step in and basically disable the connection between the witches and Kelnaka. And Indara has been trying to walk that fine line of not trying to get too involved, but seeing that her Padawan got involved and Soul's emotional attachment to Osha, she's trying to hold the line, but then her other Jedi are not holding the line here. And it's very unsettling for her, and whether or not she did the right thing or did not do the right thing. What are your thoughts about that?
Like I said, she had no option there because three Jedi were in too deep. Tobin is reckless, Saul is too attached, and Kanaka somehow is not as strong as he believed. It explains why Kanaka was locked himself in solitude on that planet because he felt guilty of what happened. Same as Tobin put himself in a deep state meditation. Andar herself, of all the Jedi, she's the wisest one of all because she wants to avoid conflict and goes by the book. But then we saw that Saul did want to save both May and Osha. But they end up making a choice, which is Osha, because he believes she is the good one. May was the bad one. But then back on the ship, when they escaped, Indara scolded him, saying, we have to go back, and then we have to tell him the truth. And Saul's willing to step up. And Indara said, how can you do that? You alter the destinies by force, literally. When Osha woke up and said what happened, and that's when they create a big white lie to cover up the mistakes by telling the Jedi Council. And Saul tells him, May start a fire, and they stop it right there. This is what I appreciate Karen Ann Moss's character even more now. Even though she died in the first episode, at least they give perspective of her as a character and why she died and how she's like back then, instead of just a tossing. But like we talked about this before, it's disorganized. This is out of place. This should have been like in episode 4 or part of episode 3 and 4. This is a bad setup for the finale next week.
Exactly, because it takes you away from that. Now, I understand that there's some shows that do that type of thing, but I think that if you're doing something new and experimental, you don't want to experiment too much where it takes you out of the story. Like I said before, in the spoiler-free part, they could have made 4, 5, 6 into basically 1.5 episodes, and basically make this episode 7 episode 4.
It makes me wonder if they did a test screen before they released these episodes. That's the point of post-production. They create the episodes, they do a test, and if it doesn't go well, they do it again. Which is something that The Acolyte should, if given a second season. I hope that they will fix what it is right now, because I have a bad feeling this end of the season will be left open-ended in a cliffhanger, and we're wondering, like, what the heck?
Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen because, according to the Entertainment Weekly article, they were going to leave it all out on this season. given the fact that this story has been fairly interesting in an era that's not been explored in the Star Wars universe. I think I give them kudos to that, but I really have to go back to the organization of it, be, so that it really can streamline some things and to make the reveals a little bit sooner so that we can get to a more satisfying conclusion. I think you draw it out way too much, it's not going to be healthy. And again, last episode, I think they spent a little bit too much time drawing out Khmer, drawing out that whole encounter between Khmer and Osha. And is it really necessary? Maybe it is in the whole grand scheme of things, but in that weekly episode, it may not have felt as necessary overall. Any other thoughts before we wrap up?
I just hope next week's finale will make up everything of this
Okay.
season. Because I had high hopes for this show, especially the actor who plays Soul is in it, and Carrie Ann Moss is in it too. It's like a roller coaster going up and down. And this episode is like a cliff, literally. So I really hope that the next episode will be like a rope to climb up to the top,
Right.
basically.
Exactly. That's our thoughts on Star Wars The Acolyte, Episode 7. We would like to hear what you have to say about this episode and about Star Wars The Acolyte overall. Please like, share, subscribe, comment down below, and we will see you in the next video. All right, take care, everybody.